So welcome to our discussion today on virtual and global teams. So we're talking about some of the issues that are involved in a big issue for a lot of us. Working on teams that are in fact not co-located. They're distributed across the globe, across time zones, and it may be working with people that we haven't met at all or at least don't meet on a regular basis. If you think about it, it's a pretty complex kind of issue, just working with teams, even if we're working with people right next to each other. Organizations are more dispersed, the relationships are more complex. Of course, just the time zones differently, who's waking up in the middle of the night, those are kind of issues. There's different nationalities, languages. Just those aspects alone can make things complicated. Again, remember some of our discussions about at least having a different communication bandwidth by being able to see each other's body language and facial expressions. We don't necessarily have that with a lot of the technologies that we're using in the virtual space. Of course, these days the idea of access to information, it's not necessarily an equal-based opportunity situation, so how do we deal with those? And just the technology skills at all. It's kind of interesting, we think, in being in North America here, that we've always had technological skill advantage. It's actually kind of interesting now that we're not necessarily on the leading edge. The shoe is on the other foot in a sense. But these are just some of the issues that we're going to have to deal with in our virtual team space. So some of the key success factors. Just some of the things that will be helpful when we're working in this virtual space. Certain standardized organizational and team processes. Reward and recognition, the project planning, career development, resource allocation. Those are the kind of things that, again, if we have agreed upon standards, so we understand how we will do this stuff, that can go a long way to making some of the complexities go away. The technology infrastructure and training, again, that makes a lot of sense. We need infrastructure, and we need to understand that our people are in fact trained and we can all use them. We don't want to have these as impediments to our ability to work together. Not only the technology infrastructure, but of course the communication and collaboration tools themselves, those specific things that we will be using across our technology to make that happen, and the processes about how to use them. Of course, a culture that does not emphasize trust, that's going to be a problem whether we're in the virtual space or not, but certainly in the virtual area with all these other issues, boy, if we don't have that trust, the odds of it happening well are pretty low. And the idea of diversity, that we are, in fact, coming from different places and different belief systems. And I think the idea is not that we're going to impose sameness. That's not necessarily going to work. The idea of diversity, which recognizes those differences as just differences that we have to work with, rather than right or wrong. And, of course, the leaders. Modeling effective communication. If you're not walking the walk, and that's not just the leader, but all our leaders, including ourselves, need to support that idea. Of course, the cultural component. What can we say? It's big, and when we're talking about culture, we're actually talking about different kinds. There's, of course, the national culture, if you will. The American culture, say, versus the Japanese or the German culture. Of course, we should always be careful about that. As we know, when we say things like a culture, we're talking about certain tendencies that as a group we tend to see certain things, but of course any individual, there could be quite a bit of variation. So let's just be a little careful about that. We are kind of using these ideas as shortcuts, but always recognize that there are in fact differences. In organizational cultures, again, it's not just the national culture, but an organization in and of itself. If we think about, if we think about the organizational values at Apple, that's possibly very different. Well, of course, we know it. It's very different than, say, the organizational structure, say, at a nonprofit like the Red Cross. And then functional cultures. Probably where we are, maybe some of the classic differences of functional culture are, say, sales versus engineering. So just by those two different functions tends to have a different culture, a different set of beliefs. As I was looking at the slide deck, I realized you may not have a good description of this Hopstead cultural analysis. So I have it here, and I'll also make sure you have this description sent to you in a separate file that you'll be able to download.